Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 1 of HBO's The White Lotus, entitled Same Spirits, New Forms. So, I have a complicated relationship with this show. I didn't think Season 1 was all that great. Like, everyone else seemed to like it way more than I did, and I didn't find those characters as interesting to watch as everyone else seemed to, and that's, that's putting it lightly. Season 2 was a significant step up for me. I thought the characters were far more interesting. I enjoyed the relationship dynamics at play. I like the commentary on class from that season. I have full coverage of Season 2 on the channel, so if you want to see my thoughts, feel free to search those videos out. Season 2, I'm pretty sure it made my top 10 as well. Having said that, I didn't know what to expect coming into Season 3, other than that my enjoyment of the season is likely to be tied to how much I connect with or enjoy or are intrigued by the characters. And the cast is strong, featuring two of my favorite actors in the game right now, Carrie Coon and Walton Goggins. So I, of course, had reason to be hopeful. And I still am hopeful. But this show routinely gets off to a slow start because it has to introduce you to all of these characters and help you understand who they are, what issues they have, the baggage that they're bringing, both literally and figuratively, to this resort. But I just didn't think this first episode was that good. Like, I didn't think it was bad. I just needed it to give me more than it did. Like, I'm not really bought in on anything that they set up because I feel like they didn't give me enough of anything to make me go, oh, I want to see some more of that. And if I'm being honest, like, you got to show me more than rich white people being obnoxious and entitled to get my buy-in. I loathe people like that, like the people on this show. Like, I don't aspire to be like them. I don't find their lives interesting. I don't find them funny. Like, so most of the characters on this show over all 3 seasons are instantly repulsive to me. So like, the show has to do something more than show me shitty people being shitty. So if you start off the season showing me rich white people being obnoxious without giving me anything else to make them more like 3-dimensional and compelling, I'm gonna be put off. And to be clear, I'm not put off right now. I'm just explaining how I approach these situations, specifically this show, because I have faith in what Mike White can and likely will do with this season. All I'm saying is that as of right now, this episode didn't do enough for me to make me want to see more. I still will watch more, and I do want to watch more because I have faith that this season will be good, but just judging from the episode alone, like, it was entirely set up. The setup itself was only mildly interesting, and it didn't stray far enough away from setup to make me like the episode on its own as just like a standalone premiere episode. I'd be willing to bet that after I watch episode 2, I'll probably hop right on here in front of you guys and say that they should have dropped the first 2 episodes at one time. Hey everybody, I just want to take a small break from this review to talk about the various other ways you can engage with me on other platforms. If you're so inclined, and I understand why you wouldn't, I am an acquired taste, but you can join the Patreon where you can get extra content like retro reviews, where I review old shows and movies to see if they still hold up today, Mike's Musings, where I talk about shows I'm watching that I don't cover on the channel, or Mike's VOD, where you can commission me to watch a show, which I will then review on the channel. And if you want to engage with me and chat with me more directly, I also implore you to join the Discord and follow the Facebook page. I set up channels in the Discord for all of us to discuss the shows I'm reviewing on the channel, and I also drop new videos in there, so this is the easiest platform for me to share to from my phone. The Facebook can be really fun because I sort of live comment on shows I'm watching, often while under the influence, I'm not going to lie. And I'll also share news there, both about television and film, and about myself as well. So if you like my content, you want to be more engaged, you think I'm charming, or you simply want to show support, feel free to sign up for the Patreon or join the Discord or Facebook today. Links to all platforms are in every video description. Remember to share all my shit to your respective social media platforms. And now back to this review. So even though I generally don't like to start talking about an episode by offering up a criticism, can I just say that I'm not a fan of this season's theme music? Like, I didn't think it was all that great, but that's definitely going to be like a skip intro for me going forward, which is a little bit disappointing. But we opened up the episode proper in phenomenal fashion with a young man named Zion at a meditation session with a woman named Amrita. Excuse me. I love the serenity, well, the initial serenity of this scene, the shots of the monkey, the peacefulness of it, but I mean, in my semi-elevated age, I've grown to appreciate peace far more than I did when I was younger. Then that peace slowly evolves into terror as Zion and Amrita come to realize that there's an active shooter on the property. Zion's worried for his mother, and he curses at a statue of Buddha right before a body floats by him in the water. And I guess I feel like that's a little piece of symbolism that, when coupled with one of the resort guests being a Buddhism major who wants to interview a monk for her thesis, leads me to believe that religion is probably going to be a big theme this season. And I'm interested to see what Mike White is going to do with that and what he has to say to want to make not just religion a topic, but starting with like Buddhism and in being in Thailand. So after this opening scene, we move on to the customary introduction scenes where the guests arrive by boat and the White Lotus crew is there to greet them. This is when we meet all the characters. We get their names, kind of like a general idea of their personalities and their story coming into the resort. And if you are unlike me and you don't take notes when you're watching TV, then this next portion of the video is for you, because I'm about to go over who we met, names, pictures, what we learned about them, all that good stuff. And again, this is part of the reason why this episode didn't work for me. Too much of it was spent on this, but it's kind of like, it's not a criticism that they spent so much of the episode on this, because this is necessary work. Like, the season as a whole won't work without this portion of the episode or without this episode. That's why I say I wish they dropped the first two. Like, we need this, but this wasn't enough to get me hooked. But anyway, here we go. Before we even get to the guests, we meet Fabian, the manager of the resort, and Kun Sritala, one of the owners. Kun Sritala is clearly going to be of importance because one of the first guests who arrives has quite a bit of interest in her husband. That first guest is Rick Hatchett. That's Walton Goggins' character, and he arrives with Chelsea, played by Amy Lou Wood. Amy Lou Wood, who is not Hannah Murray, the actress who plays Gilly on Game of Thrones, and she is also not Emily Mead, the actress who was on The Penguin and on The Deuce in the past. All I'm saying is that all three of these women, who I recently learned are not all Gilly from Game of Thrones, they're not all on this show. It's just this one. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, we don't learn much about them this episode, Rick and Chelsea. Other than that, Rick is just really pissed off all the time, and he has an unhealthy interest in Kun Sritala's husband. Side note on that, I paused it when Rick was Googling her, and it looks like her husband's going to be played by Scott Glenn. Looking forward to that. He's a great actor. Season 2 of The Leftovers. The Leftovers in general, he's on that. He's great on there. Season 2 is one of the best seasons of television ever. So yeah, Scott Glenn, looking forward to seeing him. Chelsea, she connects with a model at the bar in this episode. And that model just so happens to be dating Greg, who is now one of the only characters to be featured in all 3 seasons. We know the plan that Greg was working with Tanya, and we have to be wondering now what angle he's working with this woman. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's just going to end up being like an insignificant Easter egg. But who knows? Greg's here. Let's see what he's up to. Last thing on that, each of our groups is assigned a health mentor. Rick and Chelsea get Mook. We'll talk about Mook a little bit more later. Next, we meet the Ratliff family. That's Timothy. He's the father, played by Jason Isaacs. Victoria, she's the mother, played by Parker Posey. And then you have the 3 kids, Saxon, Lachlan, and Piper. Sax is the oldest. He's played by Patrick Schwarzenegger, son of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Schreiber. I think I should have to say who he's the son of. Like, how many other Schwarzeneggers are there? But anyway, right off the bat, I wasn't a fan of the voice that Parker Posey was doing in this scene, but she does dial it down quite a bit as the episode proceeds. I just wish they had her dial it down in that first scene so it could be less cringy and better aligned with the rest of the episode. But if she's done going that far with the voice, I'm cool. But the voice at the arrival scene, it was too much. And then their health mentor is Pam. We learn that they have an inter-family Duke, North Carolina rivalry going on, and that Piper is currently writing her thesis on Buddhism, which I mentioned a moment ago. Lachlan, he's still deciding on a school, but his father wants him to go to Duke. He's already been accepted to Duke, and in his mind, it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to go to Duke because he's been accepted there because it's Duke. And Parker Posey's Victoria is like, no, North Carolina. And Saxon is just a copy-paste of Jake Lacey Shane character from season 1 so far, and he maybe wants to fuck his brother? I don't know. Whatever the case may be, the sibling dynamic is very weird among these 3, and it's entirely because of Saxon. He does and says really weird things to his brother, directed toward his brother, and to his brother about his sister. All Saxon's doing a lot. Hopefully they'll make him a bit more complex and not a huge, massive stereotype. But I expect that they will. And we also learned that his father, Timothy, was likely into some shady financial shit with a guy named Kenneth Wynn. But that's all we really get. We don't even get an idea of how serious it could be. Like the Wall Street Journal calls Timothy. As soon as he gets off the phone, he calls Kenneth. But it kind of sounds like largely exploratory. Like, hey, I just got a call. Do you know anything about this? Like, it doesn't sound like he knows that something shady was happening. He's like, hey, somebody might be onto us. The episode closed with Victoria telling him how great he is, suggesting to me that he came into his wealth via some unseemly means. But again, that's not enough to hook me. That's a weird way to end the episode too. Like, I don't know. Like, oh, maybe he did some shady financial shit. Like, that's nowhere near enough to make me interested in seeing what happens with him next week. But they ended the episode like that was like some sort of mic drop. And I'm just like, all right, whatever. Lastly, we have our three Cougars on a victory tour. That's Jacqueline, Kate, and Lori, played by Monahan, Bibb, and Kuhn, respectively. They get the super sexy Russian Valentine as their health mentor. Jacqueline, she's an actress from a popular TV show. That's all we know. We don't know what show, how popular, what it ran, whatever. We know it's just that she's an actress. And Kate and Lori are her BFFs who were kind of like along for the ride. We learned that Jacqueline paid for the trip and has essentially been like the ringleader of their group since they were kids. Like, there's even a story that they tell, Kate and Lori, where like they played her hands and feet in a play, like literally carrying her. Like, she's like, yeah, you walked on my feet. She's like, yeah, I was your arms and I brushed your teeth. Like, oh, wow. Almost a little bit too spot on, a little bit heavy-handed with with showing us the dynamic between the three of them. We see a very complicated dynamic actually between Jacqueline and Kate, where they both consistently admire each other physically, like, oh, you look so great, you've done this. But then Jacqueline has to almost like force out compliments for her homely friend Lori, who hasn't had a bunch of work done and isn't rich. And we see the resentment on Lori's face the entire time, as well as a very awkward and funny prolonged sob when she watches Kate and Jacqueline continue to bond without her from her room. This is another example though of like, I needed more here. Like right now I've learned that Lori is jealous of the relationship that Jackie and Kate have. Cool. Like, but that's not nearly enough to make me care to see what happens to them in episode 2. Same with Rick and Chelsea. Like, I don't know shit about what's going on with Rick other than that he's pissed off. And like, yeah, it's cool that Greg is back, but like in what capacity? Like merely showing him is like, okay, cool. Like, oh, that's interesting. But like, they didn't give me anything else to even be remotely interested or have an idea of what his angle might be. Like, I can't even imagine a way for him to be relevant yet. Like, is Belinda going to see him and recognize him? And is that it? Like, that's just why I say I wish they'd given me just a little bit more. I don't need to see the whole picture, but you got to at least give me enough to pique my interest, and I don't think they did that. Speaking of Belinda, that's Natasha Rothwell's character, also returning for the 3rd season. She returns, and she seems to be on a work-related trip to see how things are going in Thailand or how they do things in Thailand in order to bring these pro tips back to Hawaii. And we learn she's going to be there for 3 months, and her health mentor is a guy named Porn Chai, which, I mean, the name says it all. We also learned that Zion, the guy from the opening scene with the active shooter, is her son. That's probably the most interesting thing to happen in this episode, in my opinion, is learning that there's an active shooter hitting the resort while Belinda and her son are both there. Further, Belinda has been going on and on in this first episode about all these good vibes and positivity and hope and optimism that she has going on, which kind of feels like an ominous sign that she could be a victim of the shooting or the victim of the shooting. By and large, that's really all that happens this episode. But before I wrap up, I did want to point out a couple of things that happened that I suspect are going to be relevant later. We learned the resort doesn't have Wi-Fi, and that they also confiscate phones, but the Ratliff family refuses to turn their phones over. I wonder maybe like if the shooter is assuming that because they know the resort's rules, that none of the residents are going to have any way of contacting authorities because of the lack of Wi-Fi and the lack of their phones. Or maybe this person has access to where the phones are and has taken the phones. But unbeknownst to them, the Ratliff family still has their phones. So maybe one of them, I don't know, calls authorities or something like that. Just a little something to get the conversation started. But I feel like the lack of Wi-Fi and phones is going to be more relevant. And it's going to be relevant later, more so than being something that's just meant to kind of help us understand the environment at the resort. Same thing for the poisonous fruit that Saxon picks up. Like, that was a huge, like, look at this moment. Like it's so obvious that fruit is likely going to be used to poison someone that I'm almost taking the opposite approach and kind of assuming that it's just a red herring and it's not going to matter at all. But gotta point it out, and they made it a point to say, hey, if that thing could kill you. So I feel like it's probably a red herring, but I don't know. It feels too obvious and predictable to be used later. Like, if somebody gets poisoned, we're like, well, obviously it was the fucking fruit. And then who all knows about the fruit? The Ratliff family. But whatever. Then also we have Mook, who I mentioned earlier. She's the health mentor for Rick and Chelsea. She seems to be the object of affection of one of her coworkers. This guy that seems to, I think he works the valet at the resort. He's very clearly into her, and he's very clearly jealous and protective. He sees her talking to what I believe Mook said was like security for Kun Sritala's husband. Could maybe that guy, the valet, be the shooter? Like, maybe like in a fit of jealous rage or something. He sees her talking to these guys. Maybe these guys did something to her, and he exacts revenge. Just a thought. Speaking of Kun Sritala, she says that she has an autoimmune disease, but she doesn't specify what it is. I don't know if that's going to matter, but I do wonder if it's in any way related to her husband and maybe Rick's interest in her husband. And sadly, that's really all there is to cover from this episode. Like, we met the characters and learned a little bit about them, but that was pretty much it. Am I bugging? Like, did you guys find this episode like, oh man, this was a great one? Like, did you find these characters interesting so far? Like, I see the potential for them to become interesting. I see the potential for their stories to go somewhere and for this season to be good. But this episode that we watched, just this 60 minutes, I don't know, man. I left it feeling pretty empty. But let me know what you thought in the comments. Hopefully episode 2 will be significantly better. Do enough to kind of like give me that buy-in, hook me, and then I can come back, like I said, next week and be like, I should have just dropped the first 2 at once. So let me know what you thought in the comments, and until next week, peace.